And good evening. Today is still Tuesday. Bam. July 20th, 2021. I'm your host, Evan George, and welcome to Bostopia Nightly News, the now infrequent and whenever I feel like it Boston local politics podcast. And since today I got to do a 2-minute and 24-second video for my TikTok audience that I posted elsewhere, I thought maybe we'd spend 15-20 minutes doing a little bit more of a deep dive into the Boston mayoral race. We are 8 weeks to go until the preliminary election, and there's a lot of exciting potential in terms of matchups. There is one doomsday scenario, but we'll get to all that. And before I do, if you did not hear it at the end of maybe the last 2 episodes, I did make it available. If you wanted to send me a donation, we'll call it. I really don't want to do the Patreon. I don't want to lock any of the content that I do. And so I made it available on one of those little Linktree thingies if you wanted to send me $4 to buy me a beer, or if you're under 21, $4 for a cup of coffee. But as always, best way to support, because I've been asked this a few times, is just to like, subscribe, share. More people that watch, more views I get. The more views I get, the more likely it is I'll continue to do this. But let's go into now the mayoral race. And I'm going to use the same format that I did on that TikTok video because I think it's just going to help me mentally to go through. And I wanted to include a little jab at Jeffrey Sanchez, who dropped out maybe 2 weeks ago at this point, but I knew the video would at least be double. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, bud. It's funny that you know who that is, though. That's a great question. So I actually do stream on Twitch. In fact, if you go to my Linktree that's in my profile, I am right now live on Twitch. And so I don't know how frequently. I tried doing Monday through Thursday. There was a lot of videos I wanted to get through. Right now, I'm just going to do the Twitch stuff whenever I kind of feel like it. But it is better than watching me on TikTok because then you get to see the actual videos and articles that I'm reading. But as I was saying, I was going to talk about Jeffrey Sanchez. He had better odds than John Barros of winning in this race. However, I think he looked at the numbers, he looked at the polling, he decided why not do a vanity tour, let all of the mayoral candidates kind of kiss your ass for a little bit. You've already gotten your name out there in what was a vanity exercise anyway. And so he almost, like Kamala Harris, bowed out early before anyone could judge how he actually would have done. And maybe he'll end up getting a little sweetener from it once he endorses who I anticipate to be Kim Janey. But we'll see. Question in the chat. Can non-residents of Boston help volunteer for mayoral candidates? Absolutely you can. And I highly encourage you to, especially if you've never canvassed or knocked doors for a candidate before, go to Michelle Wu's website and volunteer for a shift. Or you can come to one of the canvasses that I run for the candidates that Boston DSA have endorsed, and I will teach you to canvass. But if you'd like to do that, feel free to DM me. So going with the format before, talking about John Barros and his chances, and obviously I've been a little overly hard on him. That op-ed he did about rent control. I mean, when you have no chance of winning and you're going to go in there and stick to an issue, something you're passionate about, something you care about, something which is going to actually improve people's lives, I don't mind it. Stick through and make your case, make the other candidates sweat a little bit. But if on your way out, you're just going to bash a policy of rent control that clearly he never really thought of before, whoever gave him a nudge to tell him to write that op-ed because it's going to help his future job prospects. I'm sorry, I can't suffer that. So this poll came from the Suffolk University a few weeks ago, and that's what I used for some of the numbers that I gave, even though, again, there's been about at least 4 or 5 polls. They've all been pretty consistent. There's only one outlier, and that just had Annissa Essaibi-George much higher than she actually was. I can explain to you why libertarianism is kind of a joke another time. But looking at John Barros's name recognition, it's a little hard to see, but never heard of 30% of the people who were willing to participate in a poll about mayoral politics. Never heard of him. Which, even though, according to this, he had better name recognition than John Santiago, which I find shocking. But yes, 1 out of every 3 people who are going to participate in a politics conversation don't know who you are. You don't really have much of a chance of winning. And not to mention, as I mentioned before, he never polled any higher than 5% anyway. Looking at his funding now with the great chart created by Calla Walsh and a few others, I believe, he has $317,000, which is a third of what some of the other candidates have. So he has no chance. It'll be interesting to see when or if he drops out, or if he's just trying to get his name out there a little bit more. But let's go to the fun candidates, the top 4. All on the city council, and they all match up differently with one another. And that's why I put Kim Janey up at the top, but let's keep going in the order. So Andrea Campbell, as I mentioned before, she has decided not to go, we'll say, because her original pitch, and I've said this multiple times, but whatever, was that she was going to have Michelle Wu's progressive bona fides, but she was actually going to be from Boston. That's what you got. And that would have been a very convincing case. However, the moment Kim Janey entered the race, that lane was now shut off. Because now you had Kim Janey, not just the first woman who's ever been in Boston's mayoral history, not just the first person of color to ever be mayor in Boston's history, but the combination of the two. And so that got that whole historic nature of it. She's also from Boston. And so that whole lane was filled up. And rather than trying to compete with Michelle on the policies going to the left, Andrea Campbell ended up kind of just going right to the right. And it was Kim Janey who started to adopt some of the left policies of Michelle Wu. So Andrea Campbell, we get the beautiful chart right here. Andrea Campbell, rent control, no. Abolish the BPDA, no. Everyone's tenant rights to purchase because MBTA, should it be universally free? Her stance, no. It should just be buses free. Curious if this chart added the school in question. Expanding charter schools, yes. And I think she favored the standardized testing for the exam schools. So she's running just to the right of Michelle Wu, and on some issues to the right of Kim Janey. However, I will continue to say that she has always been a consistent person where it comes to police reform, or it comes to, I will use the phrase defunding the police, even though I don't think that's going to be the phrase that she uses. She was very strong on that issue a year ago, and that was true this cycle as well, so she deserves credit for that. She is certainly to the left of Kim Janey where it comes to policing in Boston. But once that avenue is closed, looking now at name recognition, because similar to Kim Janey, she is another district councilor, which means that she has never had to run in an at-large election. Running an at-large means more people know your name. Ideally, anyway, even though as this data shows, that's not always consistent. But just under 20% have never heard of her. Again, according to the same poll. And looking at the basis of support, again, it's going to be very difficult for her to make it out of the prelims. I think she would be a much stronger general election candidate. So because she has over $1 million, and if they run an incredible get out the vote operation, because this is all about turnout, and somehow use that $1 million she has very strategically, who knows? I've been wrong more often than I've been right in life. So I think her general matchups are fascinating, but ultimately, I think she has a very slim chance of advancing. And that puts us to the third candidate, Annissa Essaibi-George. Just looking at a question in the chat. Let me make sure I'm not missing anyone over here, too. I think Janey is going to become the union candidate. Well, Annissa Essaibi-George has brought in the Massachusetts Nurses Union, the Massachusetts Firefighter Union. I think they have a different, more official name than that. Former police chief. If the Boston police make an endorsement in this cycle, it will be for Annissa Essaibi-George. Everyone else is kind of split different labor unions, to my recollection. And so no one is going to solidify that. Kim Janey did something that pissed off a lot of the municipal workers in terms of the timeline to resume in-person work, because once the Charlie Baker said, F it, let's be heroes, and moved up Massachusetts's date by like 2.5 months ahead of schedule, Kim Janey followed suit, but then didn't actually give people advance notice. People have to figure out their lives, their childcare, transportation, all this new stuff again. We're pretty pissed at how she handled that. Ultimately, who the union candidate's going to be, a lot of construction unions are buying their time. Developers are spending their money on Annissa and on Janey, but I think they're spreading that money around. Everyone's accepting developer money, including my preferred candidate, Michelle Wu, though I believe she's only taken less than $20,000, which is why I told the campaign they'd be smarter just to say, I reject it, and really solidify that lane, but whatever. Who is leading? So all of this is my speculation. Again, we have polls. According to the polling data, Michelle Wu and Kim Janey kind of bounce back and forth. I think the most recent poll had Michelle Wu up by a few points, but within the margin of error. How do you get involved in Dorchester DSA? You send me a DM. I am the lead organizer for that. So if you'd like to get involved in the Democratic Socialists of America here in Boston, shoot me a DM, and I am the person to talk to. But back to Annissa. As I mentioned before, she is really the only... I mean, John Santiago I probably would have identified as a conservative candidate based upon his voting record in the State House. But she's the only candidate that... There was a piece today that actually comically I was interviewed on Background for about Annissa. And, you know, the piece describes her as a moderate or a centrist. And no, I'm sorry, she is a... Oh, awesome. I do a lot of canvases right by Phil's Corner, so definitely DM me. Okay, you ready for the Annissa Essaibi-George? According to the Calla Walsh tracker, which I can confirm, rent control, no. Abolish the BPDA, no. Touch the police budget, no. Ending the Boston Police Department surveillance, what they refer to as the BRIC system, the gang database, no. She wants to keep it. Getting the police out of schools, no. She wants police in schools. School committee, should it be Democratic or appointed? No, it should be appointed. Shocked at a charter school one. Should we allow non-citizens to vote in municipal elections? No. Should we lower the voting age in municipal elections to people at 16? No. Should we put a cap on police overtime? No. On and on and on. And of course, the cherry on top, she voted against a measure which would have required the Boston Police Department to give 2 warnings before using chemical weapons against civilians. She thought that that was too much. Now, looking at her name recognition, she actually had less visible name recognition than Andrea Campbell in the most recent poll, which I found shocking. 21% of people who participated saying that they didn't know who she was. Because, again, as I mentioned, she ran at large. And as an at-large candidate, your name is out there more because you're just simply speaking to more community leaders. You're advertising in more areas. You're knocking doors in more areas. But looking at the 2019 vote from November, so this is the general, not the prelims, and where was Anissa the strongest? Most of her support came from, I'm going to do this on the fly with you, Ward 13, 12, 11, 14, 15, 16, 17. I'll explain where these are in a second with my next friendly map. We'll be going back to 5 and 3. This is how difficult it is to try to figure out where things are in Boston and who's voting. This is also why, and I mentioned it before, if you're watching me on TikTok right now, though you know I love you, I'd recommend switching to Twitch because then you can see the visuals that I'm about to show. But, all right, Anissa did strongest. 13 is my district in northern Dorchester. Actually, this is pretty surprising. 15 and 16, also Dorchester. 16, the whiter parts of Dorchester. Yeah, so she actually did best in Dorchester, which is, I mean, surprising to some extent. However, that is where a lot of the cops and firefighters live. And I know in South Boston, she did good as well. No real surprise there. Yeah, 17%. But ultimately, in terms of her fundraising, she's fundraised. She's at 3rd place right now, and I expect her to get passed by Kim Janey within a month or two. She has, I think, close to $700,000 compared to some of the other candidates. And while I think she's going to have a difficult time getting out of the prelim, that's why I have her at 3rd place, ultimately, I think she is going to be a very formidable general election candidate. Because, as I mentioned, she, being the most conservative candidate, she is going to attract the most conservative voters. And if there's one constant in American politics, it is that conservative voters vote more, especially in municipal elections, especially in preliminary elections. This is going to have, it'll probably have the highest voter turnout in a municipal election that we've had in a while because of how competitive it is, because of how many people are doing get out the vote operations. But ultimately, it's going to be minuscule compared to the overall voting population. And if you can solidify the conservative vote, you got a good chance of making it to the general. And I think she would be very tough to beat heads up for some candidates. So we got to watch that one closely because she is the disaster scenario. Looking at some questions. See, Dickey writes, what are all the candidates' stance on climate change? I mean, they're all against it. You'd have to, they all believe it exists. You'd have to give me a stronger policy. I know Michelle Wu has made it much more of a cornerstone of her campaign than any other candidate. District 6 is a big race. Yep. So in District 6, Jamaica Plain and West Roxbury, Boston DSA has endorsed and supporting Kendra Hicks, who's an incredible candidate. So if you live in JP, if you want to get to know Kendra, if you want to meet Kendra, I do canvases for her pretty regularly. There's a big event this Thursday I can get you plugged into, and we will be knocking doors, at least as Boston DSA, for Kendra Hicks, I believe next Sunday, not this weekend, the following. But if you live in JP, if you want to get more involved, you want to support an incredible candidate, as always, DM me. And now that gets us to second place. My, again, preferred candidate, and let me take this time to apologize to Michelle Wu. I am pretty meticulous as I go through the captions because I want to make sure that I'm spelling the people's names correctly, especially women of color. And I had my eye focused on the caption so much that I forgot to double check the disclaimer that I gave for like the quick second. And in the disclaimer, I put Mitchell, not Michelle. And by the time I caught it, I have already uploaded it, and I couldn't go back and edit it. I would have had to have reshot the whole thing. So I figured I would apologize tonight. So I apologize, Michelle Wu. The video was pretty flattering for you, so I think you're going to be okay with it. But I would like to apologize, and I will do better in the future. Now, Michelle has the highest floor, but I also think she has the lowest ceiling. And what I mean by that is the moment she announced, she solidified, we'll call it the Markeyverse. She solidified the left, the activist left in Boston. Just because she is the furthest left when it comes to issues on housing, particularly housing, which she's strongest at. She's also great on transportation. She voted against the budget the last 2 years, though I do have some concerns about how she'll govern, to be honest. But I have concerns about how they all will govern. No one here is a Bernie Sanders style candidate, not in a long shot. But Michelle has been very consistent with their policies and her stances the last few years. And I would very much enjoy yelling at a Michelle Wu administration, to be honest. Now, so she has a high floor, again, that she is going to be, I don't know if I put her odds as being above 50% to get out of the prelims, but definitely in second place. However, she, I think, has a hard ceiling. She historically does worse in the Roxbury, Mattapan, Dorchester areas of Boston. Looking at her favorables versus unfavorables, where it comes to African-American voters, she is low compared to the other candidates. And that is absolutely a voting bloc she would need if she is then going to go against a more conservative candidate in the general, which she is 100%, if she gets out of the prelims, going to be going against a more conservative candidate because there's no one to the left of her. And so if you do not have that voting bloc, and the more conservative white people, than people who vote out of nativist impulses, because Michelle Wu was not from here, quote unquote. I guess you don't need the quotes. I mean, she wasn't born here. And for some people, you're not born here, they can't trust you. It's going to be difficult. I see her as probably having the easiest path to out of the prelims, but the most difficult in winning the general. But I think a lot of that depends on who makes it out. And now that gets to our fourth and final candidate. Look at this, I'm on 22 minutes, doing good. Kim Janey, who, despite having the lowest amount of funding compared to the other four candidates, again, it's because she declared the latest. People just had months and months ahead of her to fundraise, so I anticipate those numbers going up. Looking at name recognition, 11% of the people in this poll didn't know who she was. Michelle Wu had the best at 7%. Which makes sense because, again, Michelle Wu was an at-large candidate, the number one vote getter. Kim Janey was a district candidate, meaning only certain people in her district familiar with her name saw her signs 2 years ago. But that 11%, I guarantee you, over the next 2 months, we got 2 months to go, she's going to continue to get a lot of press as acting mayor. Everything she does gets the microphones and the attentions of Dorchester Reporter, the Boston Globe, Boston Herald. And there's a lot of people who will be looking at that, looking at endorsements coming her way that then say, oh, like, we want to have the first black woman in Boston's history as the full-time mayor, not just the acting mayor. Kim Janey has the much more likelihood to win than Andrea. I'm just, again, narrating what conversations I know are being had. And so people are going to get behind Kim Janey. So that's why I put her as a number one to get out. And Kim Janey, despite the fact that she passed an almost identical Marty Walsh police-friendly budget, she has made some enemies on the Boston Police Department because of how she handled Dennis White, the acting police commissioner. which is why I thought for a little bit and why I got wrong Michelle's vote on the budget. I kind of thought she was going to just pass it, keep her head down, try to avoid any lefties like me and people who are vastly more influential than I am, and then run to Kim Janey's right on police. That is a fear that I had, so I was glad that she voted against the budget, but she also did not articulate why. She just was very quick to say that this budget is not a reflection of our values. I'm voting no, sat back down. It wasn't a long thing about the police. So my fear of Michelle running a little bit to the right of Kim Janey on the issue of police could be a thing. We'll see, because Kim Janey most certainly has not made a lot of friends in the police department, and neither has Andrea Campbell. But Kim definitely has the best chances of making it out of the prelim, and if right now I had to guess, gun to my head, Kim Janey will be the next mayor of Boston. So we'll see. But all right, we got Game 6 NBA Finals tonight. Might be the last competitive live sport that's not baseball that we get to watch for about a month and a week or so. I don't know when the NFL schedule starts. So I think I'm going to run out and watch that game. However, let's see, can't wait for Kendra to win District 6. Yeah, she would be great. She is she's legit to whatever extent you can judge a politician or a future politician and say they're legit, but which is why I don't moralize any of this. I don't try to pretend I can look into someone's soul and tell you if they're a good person, a bad person, how they'll act. That's just not how politics work. I look at people's policies and I go off that. But I'm going to say goodnight to the YouTube, Facebook, Twitch crowd. Thank you as always. If you do watch this,